So, until now, we saw that more choice is not necessarily better. In this lesson, we will start close reading. We will focus on the first section, paragraphs 1 through 9. In this section, the writer will present evidence to support his ideas. Many times, writers use studies or experiments as evidence to support their ideas. So let's see how the writer does this in our section. In our skimming, we already saw that the writer mentioned evidence at the end of paragraph 1. Yet, recent research strongly suggests that. In paragraph 2, the writer brings evidence from studies that show that people today are less happy. But they don't show how this is related to choice. למחבר יש השערה שלעובדה שהרבה אנשים היום פחות שמחים, יש קשר לעודף הבחירה שיש סביבנו. אבל אין לו מחקר שבדק ישירות את הקשר. הקשר בין עושר ובחירה רק משתמע מהממצאים. בפסקאות הבאות, המחבר ירצה לבחון את הנושא בעצמו, במחקר שהוא עצמו ערך. So, let's get to work. First, let's review some elements of a study. Usually, studies begin with an aim, or the purpose, or they begin with a research question. Next, they usually describe the method. They almost always mention the results or findings. That's very important. And finally, the conclusions, which is what we learn from the study. These are the very basic elements. So, let's find these in the writer's research. We will look for each element, and let's begin with the first one. So, read paragraph 3 and the beginning of paragraph 4. Mark the writer's aim, purpose, or the writer's research question. Press pause and come back when you're ready. You're back! Great! This was easy because the writer presents some clear questions and a purpose, too. Let's zoom in on paragraph 3 and 4. In the second sentence of paragraph 3, we read, in an era, עידן או תקופה, of ever greater personal autonomy, choice, and control, what could account for this degree of misery? This is a question. כלומר, בעידן כזה של כל כך הרבה יותר בחירה, מה יכול להיות אחראי למידה הזאת של אומללות? Or in English, in other words, it means, what is the factor that makes people so unhappy? The writer continues this idea in paragraph 4. Along with several colleagues, I have recently conducted research. Here the writer begins to tell us about his research. That offers insight into why, here is our question, why many people end up unhappy rather than pleased when their options expand. This means the writer in his study wants to answer this question. This question is actually the purpose of the study, to answer the question. So, we have the first element, the aim, purpose, and the research question. Let's move on to the next element, to see the method. This describes how the researcher did his study. Usually we have a description of the subjects too. Remember, subjects in a study means the people in the study, נחקרים או נבדקים. And the procedure, the steps taken to collect the data. איך אספו את הנתונים? So, read the rest of paragraph 4 and paragraph 5. Mark the writer's subjects and procedure. It won't be so easy, so try to get a general understanding of what the writer did. We will go over together to explain a bit more after you finish. Press pause and come back when you're ready. You're back. Let's see what you marked and how we can understand these paragraphs. Let's zoom in on paragraph 4 and 5. The study begins with the words, "We began by." Let's see what the writer did. We began by making a distinction between, המחבר עושה כאן הבחנה בין שני סוגי אנשים, maximizers, those who always aim to make the best possible choice, סוג אחד של אנשים, אלו שתמיד שואפים לבחירה הטובה ביותר. And satisficers, those who aim for good enough, whether or not better selections might be out there. זה הסוג השני של אנשים, אלו שמסתפקים במה שמספיק טוב. שימו לב שהמחבר מסתמך על מילים שנגזרות ממילים אחרות. maximizers מלשון maximum, למקסם. satisficers מלשון satisfaction, שביעות רצון. בסוגריים יש הסבר למילים. שימו לב שה-ER בסוף המילה מציינת אדם או בעל תפקיד. כאן זה האנשים שממקסמים, או אלו שמרוצים. אז הוא חילק אותם לשני סוגי אנשים. כל אחד מכם כבר יכול להתחיל לדמיין איפה הוא או היא על הסקאלה. אלו הם הנבדקים שלנו. אבל איך הוא חילק אותם ועל סמך מה ואת מי הוא חילק? בואו נמשיך. Let's continue with paragraph 5. The first sentence is paragraph 5 begins this way. In particular, we composed a set of statements, the maximization scale. המחבר חיבר לצורך המחקר סדרה של הצהרות וארגן אותם על פני סקאלה שלה הוא קורא the maximization scale. This is the instrument. זה כלי המדידה שהשתמשו בו במחקר. Next, the writer tells us why he did this, to diagnose people's propensity to maximize. כלומר, הוא רצה להבחן את הנטייה של אנשים למקסום, וכאן הכוונה לנטייה של אנשים לכוון לבחירה הטובה ביותר האפשרית, ולא להסתפק בפחות. Then, we had several thousand people rate themselves from 1 to 7. אנשים, כמה אלפים, דרגו את עצמם בסקאלה הזאת. זה הליך המחקר, procedure. We also evaluated their sense of satisfaction with their decisions. בנוסף, החוקרים, המחבר והקולגות שלו, העריכו או בחנו את תחושת שביעות הרצון שלהם לגבי ההחלטות שלהם. As part of the procedure, כחלק מהליך המחקר. This includes the subjects too, several thousand people. So, what do we have? We have the method, which describes the subjects, and the procedure. So now we can go to the next element, results and findings. Let's continue to paragraphs 6, 7, and 8. Read paragraphs 6, 7, and 8. Mark the writer's results or findings. It's a lot, so I will give you an explanation before we continue. In the next paragraphs, the writer will describe the behavior of maximizers and the behaviors of satisficers. What do they do when they need to make a choice? Also, remember, our research question was asking about people's happiness. So, he will try to see who is happier. So, instead of just looking for results or findings, answer these questions. What do the maximizers and satisficers do when they need to make a choice? This is their behavior. Compare, show the differences. And who is happier, the maximizers or the satisficers? Don't forget, you need to read paragraphs 6 through 8 to answer these questions. Take your time. It's a lot to read. Try to get a general understanding. Decide what is important and focus on that. Press pause and come back when you're ready. You're back. Great. That might have been difficult for some of you, maybe easier for others. So we will go through this step by step. Let's zoom in on paragraph 6. We start by looking for maximizers and satisficers' behaviors. How do they behave? The second sentence begins a description, théorie, of the maximizers. People who score highest on the test, the greatest maximizers, engage, עסוקים ב, in more product comparisons than the lowest scores, both before and after they make purchasing decisions, and they take longer to decide what to buy. הם משקיעים הרבה יותר זמן בהשוואת מוצרים, גם אחרי שכבר קנו. מישהו מאיתנו מזדהה עם זה? וכמו כן, לוקח להם יותר זמן להחליט מה לקנות. Next, we have a comparison. When satisficers find an item that meets their standards, they stop looking. But maximizers exert enormous efforts, a lot of efforts, reading labels, checking out consumer magazines, and trying new products, etc., etc. So, we have enough for our answer here. Our answer is that maximizers spend more time choosing. They compare products, they spend more time before and after, etc., etc. And on the other hand, the satisficers don't. When they make a decision, they stop looking. This refers to the first question of the findings. Now we go on to the next question of the findings. Who is happier, the maximizers or the satisficers? Let's look at paragraph 7. In paragraph 7, we read about satisfaction. Let's take a look at the sentence. It starts with, in the end. In the end, who does the they refer to? If you read it in the context of paragraph 7, it refers to the maximizers that the text was talking about earlier. It's important to know who we are talking about. Let's continue. In the end, they are more likely to make better objective choices than satisficers, but get less satisfaction from them. The same idea we could see in paragraph 8. We found as well that the greatest maximizers are the least happy with the fruits of their efforts. So, we see that the answer to our question is, satisficers are more happy or more satisfied, or maximizers are less happy or less satisfied. In paragraph 9, the writer takes this idea a step further. He tests one more idea. Let's go on to paragraph 9 to see what he does. The first sentence says, does it follow that maximizers are less happy in general than satisficers? הכותב אומר כך, אם עד עכשיו ראינו שהממקסמים פחות שמחים עם הבחירות שלהם, האם נובע מזה שהם פחות שמחים באופן כללי? We tested this, so the writer tested this idea by having people fill out a variety of questionnaires known to be reliable indicators of well-being. He gave them more questionnaire. הוא נתן להם עוד שאלונים. Let's see what he found. As might be expected. So he found what he expected. Individuals, people, with high maximization scores experienced less satisfaction with life and were less happy, etc. Ooh, this is another finding, an important one. So, we have some significant findings. We can mark one more element of the study. This is usually the most important one. We are left with the conclusions. We can already know what the conclusions are. All these findings tell us something about the connection, or in the language of research, the correlation, המתאם בין שני משתנים. Here, the correlation is between maximizing and happiness or satisfaction. So what do you say? What is the correlation between maximizing and happiness? It's quite clear. We can say that we have a negative correlation. The higher the maximizing behavior, the lower the happiness is. So we can say that these are our conclusions. So we did a lot. We are ending our lesson. What did we learn? We learned that when it comes to choice, there are people who are maximizers. They search for the best options. And there are people who are satisficers. They are satisfied for what they find. And we learned that the satisficers are more satisfied. How did we learn this? We learned this by reading section 1. We saw evidence from studies which showed that people are less happy today, and focused on the writer's study, which showed us the connection between maximization and satisfaction. Each one of us can wonder where he or she is on the writer's scale. Are you a maximizer or a satisfizer? And on which topic? Sometimes we are maximizers in one area, like maybe shopping for clothes or buying a mobile phone. And sometimes we're more easygoing, like maybe when choosing our vacation. The next question is why this happens. Why do we get so unhappy when we try to make the best choice? But that we will see in our next lesson.